welcome everybody. It's very nice to have you here joining us, and I will make a quick introduction of what are we talking about and who we have here. It's my pleasure to introduce you to Compliance Alliance, a bunch of marketplace partners in Atlassian who are working closely with regulated industries and helping them also in their compliance requirements. And today we are going to talk about the top challenges that regulated industries have on Atlassian Cloud. If you have any questions as we speak, as we go through the webinar, just drop them into Q&A or in the chat. We hope to leave about 10 minutes in the end so that we can take the audience questions and see what you guys have, most burning questions that you guys have around cybersecurity, data protection, or any of the compliance requirements that you guys might have in your company. Like we said in the invite, this is a teaser gathering to the workshop that we have. So if there are any solution partners in the audience, then just so that we are going to have a dedicated compliance workshop in Barcelona during Team 25 Europe. And if you want to join us, please let us know and we'll get you a seat there as well. But let's start. In terms of introductions, I'm going to ask each one of the guys that I have here one question about the challenge that regulated industries have on Atlassian Cloud and how they help these clients. So let's start with Oliver. You ready?
Sure. Yeah.
Oliver is from Polymetis Apps, everybody. And the question is, when regulated companies move to Atlassian Cloud, what do you see is the most overlooked data security or data protection challenge, and how do you help them?
So the first thing is, if you're going to cloud, that's a good step. That's a great first step, just because it separates some concerns and there's some shared responsibility for your infrastructure. But from our experience building PI protection for Jira and Confluence, or data leak prevention software, we often see the overlooked challenge as just the silent accumulation of sensitive data that happens in everyday work. Like you have all these people working together, and it's all humans working together. And we work with all kinds of data and information over time, and all of this information and data sometimes ends up in these systems that we're working with. There can be relatively benign data that somehow is sensitive, like it's personal identifiable information, PII. It sometimes could be API keys that show up somewhere where they shouldn't. It could be sensitive data from a log file, a password. Maybe it's a social security number somebody sends into support for whatever reason. And these things, they're not big leaks. They're not huge things that happen. It just happens in collaboration. Like we make mistakes. Somebody uploads the wrong spreadsheet. But what happens over time is that this accumulates in a system. And after a year or maybe 2 years, whatever time frame it is, there's a wealth of this kind of information in your system. And if one threat actor then decides, hey, I just recently gained access, let's see what's here, you suddenly have a treasure trove of data that should not be shared available to that threat actor. So what can you do, really? Because the reason we're overlooking this is it happens in real time, it's multiple formats, there's no direct responsibility for any one single individual for everything. And we feel like cloud is secure, so everything should be safe. And our solution approach here is to provide Atlassian users or Atlassian admins with tools that allow you to have an automated process in the background that scans your issues, that scans images being sent in through support for all the kind of sensitive data that can and will somehow pop up in your systems. My recommendation really is try to set up an automated system, have some tool like PI protection for Jira and Confluence, scan any change in the background and just act whenever something comes up, because none of us is going to be able to monitor every single change in these systems. But if you've got a system that does it for you, that's a way to deal with that. And it's so easy to overlook this, really. So yeah, that's my main recommendation.
And that is what Polymetis Apps is helping everybody with. Oliver is from Polymetis Apps. I think the logical extension to this would be Nick and Opus Guard. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about the critical data retention challenges and how does Opus Guard help?
Sure thing. I'd be happy to. Hey everyone, it's Nick Wade here from Opus Guard. So it is a good logical extension of the problems that Oliver was just speaking about. Probably the most critical data retention challenge that we think about frequently here is just the unchecked and unmanaged growth of content daily in our SaaS tools. And by the way, it's also often unprotected, but we'll come on to that in a minute with our friend from HYCU. And what's happening here is we've done a bit of research and used a lot of other organizations' research and found that from small mid-market businesses all the way up to enterprise, there's any number of SaaS applications in use today. It goes from about 150 to about 350, depending on the size of the company. And we're creating content in those continuously. And that content is often completely unmanaged and unchecked in the sense that there's no central corralling of retention policies across any of it. It's left up to users to decide when to delete a thing. That thing's sensitivity may be untagged and unknown. It can often be up to users to decide when and how to protect a thing and if it should become part of a system of record. But all of those actions are very frequently manually taken. They're prone to human error. They're fraught with forgetfulness and, oh, this is routine work that I don't really want to have to do. Somebody should be taking care of this for me. And the typical tools that are provided by SaaS vendors to manage this stuff are generally standalone. They're fairly limited. They may not have a good audit trail associated with them, etc. So what we do at Opus Guard, recognizing that becoming a problem, is that we allow an organization to designate a group of individuals as the content retention managers. And then we give those people a central set of tools to consistently and efficiently map the organization's retention policies onto some or all of their content within Atlassian Cloud applications. And within those tools, we also provide our customers with an immutable audit trail of every action ever taken, whether by a person or some automated part of our system, in order to help our customers speed up their compliance audits and to do things like demonstrate defensible deletion when they're in a discovery motion. And so this provides a number of benefits, the first of which start off with compliance with your actual policies and with the regulations or industry frameworks that your organization is adhering to. These include things like ISO 27001, SOC 2, FINRA and DORA regulations, and so on. But another big benefit that we're increasingly seeing and talking about at Opus Guard now is in the AI pilots and projects that companies are doing internally. So the AI models that we're training, they're largely only as good as their training set, their context window, and their prompt engineering. And what happens when you feed garbage into an AI model is it gets mixed in and comes out as if it's new, good content. And so you end up getting two things occurring. You find old information that people didn't even know was still there, that can be confusing because it's presented in a sense that makes it look like it's current and relevant. And so from a simple perspective of delete what you don't need any longer, that tends to provide companies and organizations with efficiencies in all sorts of interesting ways. And so that's how we're helping organizations here at Opus Guard, is centralizing your ability to do that and providing a tool set to do that.
Fantastic. Thanks, Nick. You just summarized basically a lot of the topics that we're going to talk about, including AI.
Right.
Yeah, and I think we should move on next to Bogdan because we are in this data protection track at the moment. Bogdan from HYCU, please, can you tell us a little bit about, what will happen when there is data loss? It's more than just an IT problem, or it can be a huge compliance failure. What is the most critical backup and restore challenges that you have seen companies face on Atlassian Cloud, and how does HYCU help them?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, a quick intro. At HYCU, we deliver universal data protection across public, private cloud, as well as SaaS applications. And obviously, as such, our focus, our angle on compliance is primarily from perspective of business continuity and operational resilience. This is how we want to help organizations achieve higher levels of those. And if you look at what are some of critical services that we depend on as people, as society, if you like, healthcare, banking, energy, transportation, these are all fundamental services we all depend on. And obviously availability and integrity of the data they manage is absolutely crucial. Any kind of data loss can really be bad and have devastating consequences. As you can imagine, as a result, regulators want to step in, right? And of course, define some consistent high level of operational resilience across these industries. And of course, this kind of means imposing some regulatory frameworks. And just to give an example, within EU, we have a well-known regulation called DORA, and those are more or less enforcing kind of cybersecurity and data protection standards across specific set of critical industries. So how does this kind of touch Atlassian specifically, right? Atlassian in the cloud. And we all know that customers now move massively to the cloud. There's end of life data center announced, and there's, of course, the single direction where everything needs to go as far as Atlassian is concerned. And you would think, okay, so I move to cloud. A lot of things is taking care of me, right? I don't have to worry about this at all. I was just recently speaking to a customer, and I was so surprised when I learned that for a lot of key professionals, moving to SaaS applications is amazing because they say we don't have to be responsible for anything anymore. But what? That's not the case, right? You're still responsible for your data. Read the small print, right? And yes, that's what it is. And all this regulation, of course, moving to the cloud, you cannot avoid it. You are still responsible for your data in SaaS applications specifically. And of course, you need a backup solution to do so. And of course, HYCU is here to help. So what are some of the challenges we see then when customers face when they are thinking about, all right, let me now see what I need to do to be DORA compliant. And this is specifically for financial services within EU. So one of the things is they need to deliver isolated backup environments. So that means your backup solution should operate independently of the application that you're protecting, right? So if something goes wrong with the application, your data, your backups, your backup product should still be continue to run, right? That's obviously looks like a very no-brainer type of thing, but people don't immediately think of that and maybe sometimes select solutions that are not completely independent. Then what about backup and recovery policies? So you have to have those very tightly defined according to the risk of your data, risk profile of your data. Should I be backing up my data every 3-6 hours, once a day, once a week? You have to decide on those and document those as well. So these are things that, of course, then backup product needs to implement for you. And again, that's not potentially always the case. Sometimes backup products don't deliver the granularity you need of the frequency of backups. The same is with recovery, right? So there are these famous two metrics that every backup professional knows called RPO and RTO, right? Recovery point objective. This basically means how frequently are you backing up the data. And RTO is recovery time objective, and that is a really important one. How quickly can I get my data back if I experience a data loss? Because regulators will actually request of you to have recovery as fast as possible. You will actually have to define in what time a specific service, if it goes down, you will be able to get it back up, right? And RTO metric needs to support that requirement. That's a very important challenge as well. Of course, ensuring data integrity in backups. Imagine having a backup, but then some ransomware attack is easily able to access your backups and just corrupt them, right? You have nothing, right? That's really not what you need, and you have to take care of that as well. And probably the most important one of all, perform regular restoration testing, right? That if you don't do this, then you're not really ready, and you need to exercise, right? This is like training, physical training, right? It has to become a muscle memory, how you recover when the time of need comes. So these are the challenges we see customers face. And of course, the solution that we deliver does help alongside these parameters. And I would say specifically around Atlassian, we have a lot of experience. We are supporting so many customers with so different compliance requirements, sometimes ranging from really keeping backups for 10 years to crazy long retentions to very frequent backups and all these things. So flexibility in the backup product just needs to be there to accommodate all this spectrum of requirements that customers may have across globally, of course, not just EU, although I gave you some EU examples. So I would say HYCU is there to support Atlassian Cloud in a great way across regulated industries, but we don't stop there. At HYCU, we are also deliver 90 other integrations that support applications such as M365, Salesforce, GitHub, GitLab, Entra ID, right? Atlassian is not the one and only that needs that, right? There's all other SaaS apps that need the same. So really with the solution that we deliver, we can first and foremost help you at what is your potentially focus if you're listening to the Atlassian Cloud, but then we can really become a standard solution for your hybrid cloud SaaS business continuity compliance needs, if you like. So that's what I would say on that topic.
Thanks so much, Bogdan. In terms of, I think the alliance here, HYCU is definitely one of the bigger ones we have with us today in terms of company size. But let's move a bit closer to software development and the compliance in there. Ulrich, I want to ask you a little bit about code. When we talk about compliance and regulated industries, we very often talk about, control over things like documents, traceability across different items, but also like the approvals of code itself, not just documents. Can you tell us a little bit more about the challenges of DevSecOps and on Atlassian Cloud, and how does Izymes help those customers? You are muted, Ulrich.
Here I am.
You are?
It's my first webinar. Yeah, thanks for the question. It's a really good question. And the main challenge is that companies that have on-prem infrastructure for their DevSecOps have to surrender that infrastructure, have to basically surrender a lot of their tool chain that they have on-prem to the cloud. And that creates an illusion of security because the mindset is still, we have that on-prem security, but now we're in the cloud and we just assume that everything works the same, which is not the case. And also it causes a lot of confusion because now the infrastructure provider, the SaaS provider, takes care of a lot of infrastructure security aspects, compliance audits, et cetera, that are not under the control of the actual customer anymore. So we have an illusion on confusion bubble here, which is partly mindset and partly systemic. And that is really hard to overcome. Clients, especially in the regulated industry, struggle to take control of that. And as for the actual DevOps process, so that was more about the infrastructure, but the DevOps process leads to disjointed configurations. Like part of the configuration, especially Bitbucket Cloud, is in Bitbucket Cloud, and part of the configuration needs to be controlled by the customer, and they do that with REST API calls or merge checks. And so that all gets disjointed. And another big aspect here is also that there is a significant configuration drift in the bucket or any SaaS platform, really, that is out of control to the customer. So Atlassian plays or deploys updates and things look differently, things work differently, different users get involved, et cetera, et cetera. Of course, we think about that a lot and feel the pain of our customers and that move from Bitbucket Data Center to cloud. And we're providing a tool or an app that's called WorkZone, and that the name already says it creates a safe work zone for teams where we have safe automation that is supported by a rule set, a clear rule set that is very much configurable and adaptable to the workflow of the team. And it also enforces the rules. It also has a kind of compliance and audit trail, even electronic signatures for code approvals. So that ticks a lot of boxes. And what's more important is that it's all in one place, and it mirrors the sense of control that customers are used to from a data center or from their own infrastructure, from the hosted infrastructure. Yeah, just to sum it up, with the apps that we provide, it's not only WorkZone, but also another couple apps that help teams to stay in control of their workflow and audit that and approve those workflows. And that's for configuration, but also for the actual pull request or code approval workflow. We treat, or with WorkZone, you can treat code like a document that needs an approval workflow, and it's not just merge and approve and quickly be done. And it also ensures that there's a segregation of duty, which a lot of regulated industry clients need to prove to the regulator that they have a segregation of duty. And that means we have to find reviewer groups and mandatory reviewers and signature reviewers that need to electronically sign pull requests. So yeah, basically that is how we deal with the uncertainty and the illusion and confusion in DevSecOps cloud systems.
Great, thank you so much, Ulrich. And moving even further to the regulated industries from here, I have a question to Matteo, because in regulated industries, a lot of them, quality management and risk management are at the core of compliance. How do you help them? How do you help these companies who are using Atlassian Cloud need to have a quality management system and need to have some risk management in place?
Yes, so my name is Matteo Gubellini and I'm the CRO of SoftComply, and we help companies working on Atlassian setting up two of these processes that you mentioned. So risk management in Jira and document management on Confluence, and we are on cloud. In terms of challenges and the helps that we provide, like many things have already been mentioned today, but we are a bit more specific in terms of, let's say, configuration. So Jira and Confluence, and in general, the Atlassian tools are a great tool, but they are quite vanilla. You can do whatever you want, but you need to spend time configuring them. And that's why there is a very busy marketplace with a lot of apps that can do different things. So in terms of risk management, the idea was a lot of companies do risk management in Excel. Not a lot of companies, the vast majority, I would say. And Excel works perfectly until you need to do the traceability. So you need to see where your risk is, how you mitigate it, what type of controls, if you do any tests and so forth. And Excel stops working. Like at this point, it's all manual and very prone to human error. Instead, tools like Jira, like databases, they're very good at tracing objects. You can link them, and Jira does a really good job of that. But they typically they don't have the kind of the table view. So if you open an item, if you open a risk, you see only that one. So the idea that we had is that to put this Excel-like view on top of Jira, so you can treat every risk as a Jira issue. So then you can link it to bugs, to requirements. For example, if somebody mentioned 27001 control test and so forth, but at the same time have this kind of table view. And then once you have your traces, then it's quite easy to export this to whether standalone file, bring it in Confluence, or just leave it in Jira. It's something that maybe at the beginning takes more time to create this traceability, but it saves you a lot of time after, like when you are in maintenance mode. And of course, it ensures that the compliance is maintained more clearly, because it's not like adding a row in Excel and all the links break pretty much. Here, an item in Jira is an entry in the database, and it has a unique ID, you're never going to miss it. On the other side, Confluence, what we help companies with is setting it up as a proper document management system. Again, Confluence is a generic document management system, pretty light, has a lot of features, but nothing really specifically for regulated industry where you need a certain type of electronic signature with a certain specific format, detailed control of permissions, restriction of the documents, versioning, and so forth. Confluence is more designed for online generic collaboration, intranet, and things like that. So what we do is that we have an app that takes a corner of Confluence, just a corner of Confluence, and bolts it down and creates a very rigid structure, but very controlled, very compliant structure where you can manage your documentation. So we have compliant electronic signature versioning that is independent to the Confluence versioning that sometimes can create some problems. We can have workflows, life cycle, and we try to actually again bring in idea from outside Confluence. For example, Jira works very well when you have to, outside the risk management, when you have to manage a specific item like a bug, for example, or a specific requirement. And you can go get it through the workflow, and based on the step, certain fields can be activated, locked or unlocked. Some of them are required. And this is something that in Confluence you typically don't have, because you have a page, and if you can edit a page, you can edit everything. If the page is locked, you can't edit anything, and Confluence doesn't really know what you have changed in the document. So we brought in the concept of fields into our document management system, so you can have a hybrid between a document and a Jira object, like a work item now they're called, so that you can actually apply constraints to a workflow like in Jira, but with the ability to create a nice document. It looks like a document, exportable like a document in Confluence.
Cool. Thank you, Matteo. And this was the introduction round. Now on to the focus questions of what we are here to discuss. Most of you in the audience now probably have heard Atlassian's announcement of data center end of life that already some of our panelists mentioned. And we're going to talk a little bit about the compliance challenges that companies now have migrating to cloud. A lot of solution partners, a lot of ecosystem members would say, oh, but we already saw it coming, right? Nothing new here. We knew that the cloud is being pushed so heavily that data center end of life is about to happen. We did not know that it's in 3 years, which is pretty short time period for regulated industry clients. And Ulrich and Nick also mentioned this illusion of security. And I want to pick your brain, Oliver, here on this particular topic of this false sense of security. On one side, we had this data center where we also thought that, okay, we are in control. We have everything under our control. Now in cloud, Atlassian handles everything, right? But then we also have the shared responsibility model. So can you elaborate a little bit here, Oliver? What are the risks? What are the opportunities? What are the real issues that regulated industries have in terms of migrating to cloud? And where do you see they can get some help?
Yeah, certainly, Marian. The thing is, like on data center, on premise, I'm responsible for everything. I have to do everything myself, or my teams have to do everything. And we can actually know everything. And then we move to cloud. And it's a bit like renting a house instead of buying one. You just pay a monthly allowance and everything is done for you. That's a kind of a false sense of security, as you alluded to, because Atlassian doesn't do everything for you. And frankly, no SaaS vendor does everything for you. There's always a shared model of responsibility there in cloud, just like in your actual house. To illustrate that a bit, like, and let's keep with the house thing, right, as a metaphor. Say you're renting a house, which is your Jira Cloud instance, and Atlassian provides you with strong walls, great foundation, logs, so you can actually manage access to that system. Maybe you have some way of choosing who gets the key to the house. But what happens inside the house, it's kind of your thing, right? If you leave all of your tax returns lying around openly, if you just have everything everywhere, if you have really old documents from last year, like if you never throw anything away, your house might be messy. Like all of these things can happen. And sometimes you have to throw things away, the defensible deletion thing. This is something that only you can decide to do. So there's a shared responsibility on your Jira instance. You are responsible for the content that's in it. You're responsible for the content that your users put in. You're responsible for making sure the content that you need to take care of, that you need to keep for a long time, can be kept for a long time. You have to make sure that the content that you need to get rid of, that you need to remove, be it because, again, this is a defensible deletion where you have to know this isn't here anymore. Or maybe it's sensitive data, it's PII data, PHI data, something that we could help find. You have to make sure that information is gone. So you manage everything that's going on in your house, really. Atlassian gives you a foundation, but they only give you tools. And then it's up to you to manage what's going on in there. And if you look at data breaches over the last few years, a lot of them have changed from somebody hacked into a data center to somebody left a key and there was all this stuff lying around. Yeah, the risk profile has changed. Things are better and easier, but it's also dangerously easy to overlook that you still have a big job. Security is still a team sport for all of us.
Thank you. I think we should continue here with Nick and Bogdan, who wants to pick up from here in terms of also cloud, the challenges from moving from DC to cloud in terms of data retention, data backup.
I just briefly, maybe. Do you want to go ahead, Nick? Go ahead, Jeff.
No, I was just going to say the first thing that comes up is data protection. So I'm going to hand it to Bogdan.
No worries. Yeah, after you move to cloud, of course, we've already determined shared responsibility makes you responsible for your data. And I did outline a little bit the topics already, what typically challenges are and what customers need to be aware of. First, of course, what is their compliance requirements? And then, of course, define those business continuity and operational resilience requirements and implement them through a backup tool, right, of their choice. One of them, hopefully HYCU. And so what we mostly see is that, as I already said, the most important things are you need to define how quickly will I be able to recover if something happens, right? You define different risk scenarios. And then this metric is called the RTO, recovery time objective. And if you say, hey, my service is going to be back up and running. If something bad happens, I lose data. Within 4 hours, you actually have to then ensure you do that. And then this kind of brings up another important point. You have to test whether you can actually meet this 4-hour RTO, and you have to do fire drills and see, okay, can I do it? Or is 4 hours unrealistic because I have 700 gigabytes of data I need to restore for that specific Atlassian service, right? So these things are realities and mostly get overlooked. And then, yeah, the backup product is there to support them, simplify that. But the fact is, backup was your responsibility in data center. It simply just remains your responsibility in cloud. So nothing changes when it comes to that. So it shouldn't be viewed as something, oh, I have to do something now. It's always been there and it's your data, right? Why wouldn't you want to protect it?
True, thanks. We have a question actually related to these responsibilities from the audience also that I think we can take here. If there is a clear list of Atlassian Cloud responsibilities available for the client to understand what they should be taking care of themselves and what can they leave for Atlassian?
I believe there is a document called Shared Responsibility Model. If you Google that, Atlassian Shared Responsibility Model, you will get a link to a nice PDF that outlines everything Atlassian does versus what is customer's responsibility. And yeah, backup is right there along with endpoint security. All that is always customer's responsibility and some other items. Please check those out.
Thanks, Bogdan. Thank you. And maybe we can jump to Ulrich, to you. If we are talking about... Oh, sorry.
Marion, I've just got one thing to add to what Bogdan was saying, if that's all right. Data protection itself also benefits from effective and proper retention management in a couple of ways. And obviously, as the retention manager guy, I just want to talk about it. First off, we talk about not hoarding old content in your SaaS applications at Opus Guard. And the same is true inside of data protection itself. You eventually need a retention policy and to expire out old backups. But when you think about it from this perspective, the less you have to back up and the less you have to orchestrate and operate across all of the storage for your data protection, then just the more cost effective and cost efficient it becomes. And for HYCU in particular, right, they're the orchestrator and operator of all these things, but people are paying endless amounts of money for object storage that HYCU is managing. So if they keep their content clean and streamlined in the original source systems, then it will help keep their data protection clean and streamlined too. So I just wanted to mention that.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. Thanks, Nick. Thanks for pointing it out. Ulrich, so let's talk about regulated industry moving from data center to cloud. What do you see are the main challenges or main concerns that these companies may have? And especially when we talk about software development companies, what do you see would be the main challenges that they face?
I touched on that a little bit earlier, that in my first point, that there's kind of a culture shock and the illusion and confusion scenario. But Bogdan said a really good thing. He said companies had to back up on data center and they have to back up on the cloud. So the mindset doesn't change, as in we have to do something about compliance, and we had to, and we still have to. And the question is, how are we going to do it? So the risk here is that a culture shock and a stressful situation, compliance might be experience a shift right scenario where they think, oh, we'll think about compliance later. We'll just get the products and the teams up and running, and everyone can write code, and we can keep the products active. The problem here is that's actually a high risk, because problems and errors can propagate when there's an initial lack of compliance or lack of control, and that's very expensive to fix. And with the tools, we provide a seamless kind of integration between a seamless migration from data center to cloud. So our products are available on data center and cloud with a migration tool, so the customers and users can take their rules and their workflows with them. Yeah, that's basically releases them from the shift or from doing it later, because they'll just migrate it and take it with them like everything else.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, Ulrich. And on one of those concerns that arise, or challenges that arise in companies that are moving from data center to cloud, is the frequent changes in cloud that we can't do anything about. We have to go and take the last version of Jira or Confluence. Matteo, a question to you. Do you find companies underestimate the need to validate Atlassian Cloud and the apps for compliance frameworks that, for example, medical device companies have? And what can they do about it? Because if they are data center server, they have a lot of time to validate their tools. But when they are on cloud, they don't have that. What do you see? What can they do about it? And how big a challenge is it actually?
Yeah, it's actually a bit of polarization here of needs that we have seen. So one side, there are people who still want to have the same approach as an on-premise instance. So they want to have the control of everything. They want to be able to decide when to update their software and so forth. And they believe that the cloud is never, ever an option. On the other side, as you mentioned, there are people who barely know what that means and what are the implications of this software updating regularly, daily or monthly. So the approach here is that there are ways to validate software cloud tools, not just Confluence and Jira, but any cloud tools. And regulation like 21 CFR 11, they have clauses talking about the system where you are not the owner, you're not the one who manages the instance. You may be admin of your content, but you don't manage the software. So it is definitely possible. You just need to be a bit smarter. There are ways that we have implemented, for example, to manage these situations. On one side, if as developer of a product, we can validate our own software because we control it. Now, we can't control the interface with Confluence, for example, but we can validate it. On the other side, what do you do with Confluence and Jira themselves, for example, or Bitbucket? It is possible to run automated tests that test your own instance or just the Confluence in general, for example, and spit out regularly a set of results that you can use to defend the fact that, yes, I'm not in control of my instance of Jira, but I can prove that it works as intended, because ultimately the validation of a software tool, of any software tool, is there to prove that the software works as intended. It's not something that is done just for its own purpose, but you need to demonstrate something. And you can demonstrate in being a bit more, not necessarily flexible, but a bit more creative in terms of how to do. And even the FDA themselves, they published a guidance, or maybe still in draft a year or two ago, talking about these QA activities around the software tools. So it's not just about validation. Yes, you need to have some sort of test, but it is up to you to decide how you want to validate it, depending on the use that you make of it, the risk that it poses for your company. And different companies, different industry, they see this differently. For example, the FDA themselves, they are not incredibly worried about the security of your data, although they mention it in terms of in terms of integrity, but they're not too worried about the confidentiality unless it's HIPAA protected data. The fact that your system is down is not their concern. They want you to make sure that if your system does certain things, and these are critical for your product or for your activity, they work as intended and do it as intended. So there is a spectrum of activities that you can carry out. Some of them could be manual checks, most of them should be automated checks. You can carry out this testing your instance as a black box, which is probably the ideal scenario. So if you have some automated test that can literally open browser and click on a button and see what happens and make sure that what is expected to happen, it actually happens. Or with the fact that Atlassian provide quite an extensive API, you can actually test the API, you can test the backend and see if it is responsive, if it is still work as intended. Considering that in many cases, Atlassian, very often the changes that they push are UI related changes. So they move a button, they put the button somewhere else, they recently changed the navigation for Confluence and so forth. So these tests, they don't just detect problems, but they detect actually changes. And this result can actually help you stay on top of these changes. Say, hey, I've run this test failed, but it didn't fail because it's broken. It failed because they moved the interface. So this tool is actually good at detecting changes. You can show that you don't just rely in the email that Atlassian sends around regularly saying, okay, this is what we pushed, that may or may not be inclusive of everything, but it's something that you can do yourself internally. So there is a wide range of options available.
Thanks. And then continuing from this with this topic of how to attract and keep the regulated industry clients that Atlassian currently has on DC to come to cloud and stay on Atlassian. What is it that we can do together with Atlassian as marketplace partners, or also with solution partners, to better build this kind of trustworthiness of Atlassian to the users, that they feel safe, that they feel that their data is secure and in a safe place? Oliver, what ideas do you have? We very often, as in an ecosystem, we always say that, oh, this could be better and that could be better. But what it is that we all of here believe that together we can do much better than alone, right? Like the slogan of Atlassian themselves, right? It's possible together what is impossible alone. How do you feel? What can we do better in terms of showing this trustworthiness of Atlassian products together with the apps to the users, especially in the regulated industries who are now very concerned about their having to move to cloud?
So I think the main thing that we can improve, that we actually can do ourselves, is increase transparency on what it is we're doing, what it is, or how it is that our apps work and function. And I find that very often when I'm describing how we do our data leak prevention, how it works, how do we scan stuff in real time, why aren't we a data processor? It's very often explaining in detail, sometimes to a technical audience, sometimes to a regulatory audience, what it is your product does, how it does it, and what kind of security steps you're taking. Because I think we all have similar concerns. Like we do handle data, or potentially handle data from our customers. We try to make sure we do that carefully. And we all want to have our customers to stay safe, stay secure, but also to fulfill their regulatory obligations. And it's a lot easier for them to prove that to regulators if we in turn do our homework and are able to prove that. But if I could make a wish from Atlassian, there's one thing that I think is severely missing in cloud that was available in data center. And that's the ability to make permanent changes to the data stored when needed. So basically being able to redact sensitive information that should no longer stay in the system, but that does need to leave a trace that it was once there. Think a credit card number, think some PII data or PHI data about a person that they won't remove, that they have a right to have erased in the EU under GDPR, and that can be redacted. That's technically, that's not much of an issue, but making the API to do that available, not just to marketplace vendors like ourselves, but really to any admin that needs this for their customers and clients. I think that could alleviate a lot of pain for customers.
That's amazing. That's a really nice reach to Atlassian. Hopefully they are listening. Nick, you may want to add a little bit here also about what it is that you think cloud will bring and what can we do better together and what maybe is your wish to Atlassian?
Yeah, so I have a unique maybe perspective in the sense that I ran the marketplace business for Atlassian from when it launched through to 2018. So I've seen it from the inside and I've spent a lot of time talking with similar players at a much larger scale, like Salesforce, for example. And I think Oliver made the point, maybe a couple of people made the point earlier in our conversation, that with data center and the prior server versions, you're in control of everything that's happening. And so if you install an app from Atlassian's ecosystem of vendor partners via the marketplace, it's down to you to figure out whether or not it's doing all the right things. And your cybersecurity shell around your business is what protects that application. In the cloud, it's completely different. And what we see is increasingly what Salesforce went through in order to grow their app exchange, right? Atlassian customers want to know who sees their data, where it goes, how it's handled, and where the applications that they might choose to add on to their Atlassian estate evaluate out against those types of questions, as well as all the basic cybersecurity standards. And so it's a maturity cycle that I believe we're in. And I think that leads to a couple of effects. The first is that we as partners of Atlassian, I believe, are going to have to be prepared and be open to more scrutiny and to more standards that we are held to, and that our code is held to, and that our cybersecurity practices are held to. Interestingly enough, Opus Guard just got our signed SOC 2 Type 2 attestation report this morning. So we're chuffed about doing those things and demonstrating them ourselves. But I do think that we'll start to see more questions of things like cloud fortified and runs on Atlassian programs being strengthened, having increasing views into our business and our code, and doing a better job of all of that. That also leads to, okay, there are more investments associated with getting these things to happen. And so naturally, I believe the applications that customers may want to add on from the ecosystem of vendor partners like us is also going to mature and grow. And so you hear Atlassian talking about enterprise solution selling. The things that we're building in the future are probably not small widgets that do small things that can be easily and quickly installed. They're probably serious answers to serious questions. And those are the kinds of questions that we as the Compliance Alliance like to talk about. And so hopefully the things we've said today have been interesting. And yeah, I believe we'll see more of at least these two angles in the future.
Yeah, and actually on this topic also, for everybody who's coming to Barcelona, we will have dedicated sessions in the workshop about Isolated Cloud and also about their app security. And this is especially true to what Nick said, that there's one thing that we always say to our customers, oh, Atlassian has a really amazing trust center, but they are also expecting more and more from us because it is, in that sense, also shared responsibility, right? And we take care of the users as well. Maybe I think we're running out of time very soon, so I'll ask Ulrich one last question of what we always believe in Compliance Alliance. How can we all work together a little bit better to keep and attract these regulated industry clients on Atlassian Cloud? How can we get them from the data center to cloud? We're hearing a lot of this kind of, oh, but wait, maybe they are leaving Atlassian platform now that they can't go to Atlassian Cloud. There are not that many options where to go. Everybody is on cloud. What it is that we can do better to help them stay with us, with Atlassian on cloud. What do you think?
My idea, my vision is that we have a kind of a unified compliance report, compliance reporting, and unified. When I say unified, the compliance posture that Confluence and Jira Cloud and JSM and other Atlassian core apps give to the customer, but also have a unified interface where apps that enhance that posture, like Risk Manager or electronic signatures, whatnot, all the apps that the members of the Compliance Alliance provide can report into this interface and expand the special needs for in regulated industry of the compliance posture. So Atlassian gives a kind of a base layer, and then depending on the needs, our customers, Atlassian customers, can improve their posture, and all of that is automated and is based on a rule set or a schema that the apps can report into for a centralized compliance management dashboard. So that's a dream. And yeah, that is, I believe that is very attractive to the industry to have something like that.
Absolutely, and this is something we are working on. So hopefully it will not remain a dream. It will come as a reality. Bogdan, do you want to add something to it? What do you see is the most important thing now working together to help the DC customers move to cloud?
Yeah, sure. I think Oliver hit the right point there. In data center, everything was possible, right? You could go in and do these permanent changes in the database and nothing was off limits almost. And in the cloud, everything was a white box, right? You can do whatever you like. In cloud, it's locked down. All of a sudden, Atlassian database is a black box. You have no access to it. The only window into your data is user interface or REST APIs, right? And I think from the backup perspective, what is important is that these REST APIs really have to be good and have to be complete. They have to support the backup use case extremely well so that you can recover really everything. And unfortunately, that's not always the case. So if anything, I would wish for more complete REST API that would allow us to implement basically total data recovery in any case that customer needs. That's the thing.
Thank you, Bogdan. We got one question of the shared responsibilities PDF that Oliver recommended was a very great starting point, but is there a list of marketplace apps that help the user fulfill their responsibilities? I have not seen this myself. I don't know if you guys have seen such a list of marketplace apps that help fill the responsibilities that the shared responsibilities model PDF talks about.
Can you repeat again?
The shared responsibilities model of Atlassian, the question, is there a marketplace app list that helps the user to fulfill these responsibilities? I have not seen one, but I don't know if you guys have.
No, we haven't.
No.
I think what is mentioned in this document is that if you use marketplace apps, then they are your responsibility, right? So that means whatever data you enter into those marketplace extensions, again, Atlassian is not responsible for data you enter. So it's between you and marketplace vendor, very likely. What it is, maybe that's what the question meant to ask, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think it is about that. Yeah. And we have no more questions, so I'll jump to Matteo, and I would like to hear your wish to Atlassian. What would you wish if you could have one wish? I don't know if it's a validation related.
It's more aspirational, but they're getting there. They're starting to understand the problem of the regulated industry, but they're getting there a bit too slowly, in my opinion. As Compliance Alliance, we can help them. We tried to help them in the past understand, okay, look, this is a problem for this type of industry. But it is something that I think eventually they will realize that they want to, if they want to expand this growth, because now they're very growth driven, that is the reality, they will need to start targeting big regulated industries, which is not just automotive, the other ones that they are currently on, and they will realize very quickly that there are requirements that they have never considered that they should be meeting, and hopefully, so basically to become a more compliance savvy, faster than the current pace, probably. We've talked to them in that they are still mostly at an Internet of Things type of industry, is more, let's be creative, and now AI, things like that. But there are other things they should be focusing on in terms of reliability, resilience, and compliance that are equally as important, because at the end of the day, these are tools that people use for working. This is not social media. This is not Facebook. This is not Instagram. So it's, at the end of the day, it's okay if it is boring.
We make it a little less boring, hopefully.
Yeah.
Thanks, Matteo. And we are running out of time, but I wanted to let everybody know that if you are coming to Barcelona, please let us know. We'd be happy to meet up with you. We never managed to touch the AI topic. That is a huge one. So there's a lot there that is to uncover, and we'll do that in the workshop in Barcelona. So we'll have isolated cloud, we have marketplace, app security, trustworthiness topics, we have AI, and we have also solution selling. So we'll touch upon these topics all in Barcelona. If you're coming there, please let us know. And if you're not, then thank you so much for joining us. We'll definitely do a summary session of the workshop online after the Barcelona event, so that you'll hear what we talked about. And thank you to all my lovely panelists as well. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Mariam.
And have a lovely day, night, or afternoon.
Yeah.
Thanks, Marian.
Thanks.
Yes.
Have a good day.
See you.
Bye.
Bye.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.